Hi guys, welcome to the Booktuber channel. My name is Booktuber and this is my first video, so bear with me. I'm an aspiring booktuber. I mean I like books, obviously. I was the sort of person who was reading Edgar Allan Poe when I was 6 years old, and I did finish the complete works of Edgar Allan Poe when I was 6, so anyway. Today we're going to be talking about Fahrenheit 451. It's a book by Ray Bradbury. Ray Bradbury, many of you may know, is a prolific science fiction writer. He was, at any rate. He's dead now. Awkward. But he wrote a lot of science fiction, although he didn't want to categorize it as science fiction. He sort of preferred it to be more fantastical and magical, although it was science fiction, pretty much. We are, however, going to talk about Fahrenheit 451. The trailer for the movie adaptation, it came out last year. But from what I gauged, it was a complete flop because they incorporated computers and everything else that just wasn't in the novel. So obviously it was a flop. But what I want to talk about is how this book is not just relevant today, but is also a very good depiction of the sort of trends and the brain rot, as I like to call it, that is happening today. So I think that it's a very good depiction, even though it was published in 1953 and the writer couldn't possibly have known that we would have Bluetooth devices, although he did call them as Beatles in the book. So the first theme is, obviously, the book is about censorship and it's about controlling a population, and Captain Beatty, the guy who's supposedly the villain, he sort of says something interesting, and I paraphrase, that he says that if you allow people to read books, they'll get all kinds of ideas and they'll start thinking. That reminds me of what never mind, insert. So he said that people will get ideas, and then that will result in an existential crisis, and they'll start questioning a lot of things because obviously it might give them free will or clarity of thought, whatever it is. So that's why it was better if people didn't read them, and that's why the book is all about book burnings. And I have in my mind been able to sort of compare it to the Nazi book burnings because the concept behind them seems similar. So it is about that. So the other theme that really caught to me, which is really applicable today, is the emotional disconnect. Now there is this character Mildred, who's the wife of the main, sort of the protagonist, Guy Montag, and she's his wife, and she's always with her television family. She's detached from real people, but she's really tuned into the shows and the sort of never-ending garbage information that she's being given, and she thinks that it's making her more knowledgeable, but it's actually making her dumber, and it's rotting her brain, and it's preventing her from having any real contact or any real relationships. Now, what does that remind you of? I mean, isn't that what we do all day on our computers? We're not meeting people, we're not talking to people, we're not interested in meeting or talking to people unless it's WhatsApp or what have you. So that really says ions about sort of our evolution as a human species, and I don't think that it's good. I don't think that that's the way it should be. So the other thing was that Mildred was robbed of a capacity to wonder. The other character, sort of her alter ego, if you will, Clarice, she has this capability to wonder. She can imagine the way things should be. She has her own ideas, and that's part of why Guy is he's attracted to her or whatever. But then obviously she ends up vaporized. I am sort of in my mind playing this side by side with 1984 by George Orwell because that's one of my favorites, and I don't know, they seem like they want to convey approximately the same message. Lastly, because I promised myself I'd keep this under 4 minutes because, watch time. Ray Bradbury had this amazing insight into the way society would develop. He's talking about all this technology. He's talking about the Hound, which is a kind of machine which can which burns books, but also seems to have a life of its own, and it can sort of sense rebellion. It can sense where something's going wrong, and it's sort of made out to be this kind of faceless hunter of people that have rebelled, and and obviously it does start sort of following the protagonist at some point when the protagonist decides that he's had enough of this shit. So obviously there is that, and obviously there's the Beatles, and there's a few other things. I keep in my mind again, I can't help but think of the telescreens in 1984 and how it's about the same thing. It's the technology, and I don't know how Ray Bradbury figured this out 70 or 60 years ago. I don't know how he knew that this is the way it would turn out. And in fact, I am going to make a video about 1984. I mean, if anyone wants to see that, please sound off in the comments. I'd love to hear that. And that's pretty much, all that I have to say today. If you enjoyed this, if you found this interesting, if you'd like to see a series on dystopian sort of novels, dystopian content, if you're into that sort of thing, definitely leave a comment. Thanks, guys.